So, Gerry, if you could just tell me a few words about CareerXroads, and then we can talk more about the recruiting leaders
Great.
you work with.
Fabulous. Thank you for being here and engaging. It helps me when I come to conferences like this and get a chance to see people from other countries. So I'm obviously, I've been around a while. It's pretty obvious from that point of view. I've spent more than 40 years in human resources.
Wow.
And my background, though, is started out as engineering. So I have an engineering degree, and then I have several graduate degrees in organizational behavior and human resources. And I went to work for one of the largest companies in this country. I was very fortunate to go to work for Johnson & Johnson. The Band-Aids and all of that sort of thing. And it was at a time when the world was changing in the 70s and 80s. Lots of new technology were coming in. There was a cachet, there was credibility if you had both an engineering and a human resource background. So I was able to work both inside and outside of human resources. I worked in operations, I worked in human resources.
All in Johnson & Johnson?
All in Johnson & Johnson for about 10 years. And then decided that there was something else out there, they must be. And bounced around to some very interesting jobs, but all of them related to recruiting in one way. So I worked in a staffing firm. I worked in an executive search firm. I had been in a college working in university relations when I was going to my graduate work. So really, all of the time that I've spent in my adult life has been in some way shaped different parts of recruiting. So in the early 90s, I became fascinated by how the internet was going to impact what was going on. And in '96, I wrote a book called CareerXroads. That was about the emerging technologies and how they would impact recruiting. And it was popular, and so I wrote another book the next year, and they bought that too. And that happened for 6, 7, 8 years, and as a result of that, I became a little bit known here in the United States. A little bit known. Sold many hundreds of thousands of copies, actually.
Wonderful.
But there was this cool thing that was happening. The internet was obviously getting bigger and better and more involved. In 1997, for example, fewer than 2% of the hires were attributed to anything related to the internet.
Wow.
By 2002, 20% of the hires were attributed to the internet. And today, you would have to say it's sort of like a phone. How could you actually hire somebody with the internet not being in there somewhere, you know? So I began tracking. I was just fascinated by how do you track the evolving changes as they come. And I got rid of my book because what was happening, Google obviously was becoming a really great search engine, and my book was no longer easily useful from that point of view. And I was meeting a lot of fascinating people. So people who were starting up companies, but people who were leaders in large corporations and struggling to figure out how do you put this technology stuff together.
Okay.
So I had two choices. One, I could become a consultant and go out there and take a job and help people do it and then go to the next job.
Yeah.
And I said, nah, I don't want to do that. I'd rather help people find out what other people are doing. So I brought together 20, 25 people that I knew, all in large companies. So companies like Microsoft and Amazon and J.P. Morgan, Chase, and I don't know, Walmart.
When you're saying people, who did you choose, or who did you
Well,
to?
I mean, it's a great question, Morit. I decided I'm getting older, and I don't have patience anymore for people who have too much of an ego. So if they like to talk but can't listen, I told them they can't come, and I didn't want their money.
So it wasn't about their position in the company, it was more about what they brought to the table?
No, as a matter of fact, some of the people who were in the highest positions, if they were too politically engaged and not looking down and involved at the trench level, because I questioned them more about what do your people do, and if they didn't know, I don't want them.
Okay.
Because I wanted to have a environment where people could talk to each other about what really is being done, what they're really measuring. So I needed people who shared, and some companies would not share. In 2002, when I started this, IBM, Procter & Gamble, and several other companies, Microsoft was one as well, would not share. They said, I want to come to your meeting, but I want to listen. I do not want to give. I said, you can't come. We also decided no vendors, no suppliers, no consultants. And no more
even
than...
the bigger ones? Even the bigger
Nobody.
vendors?
None.
Okay.
Zero. Because what I wanted people to share was what really goes on. If a consultant was helping them, I want them to share how good that consultant really is. If they have a tool like a Taleo or whatever, I want to know what works, what doesn't work. Because those are the people who have to work with them next, right? So my goal was that people openly were able to bench with each other, and that would promise that if somebody from our group were to call, they would answer the phone.
Okay.
They would answer the question.
So it's guaranteed networking.
Guaranteed networking. I guaranteed that they would answer the phone. Otherwise, they can't come again. Okay. And I get on their back. And I'm an obnoxious person when it comes to it. So I really believe that when you enter an era in which change is happening literally every day, there is no way that you can go to a book, because by the time the book is written, it's already over. You know, we're already on to the next thing.
Yes.
And you need to see what other people are doing in a given area. If it's branding, if it's metrics, if it's sourcing, if it's executive, if it's college.
Right. To hear it from one another.
Each of these are different areas where people need to hear from each other about what they're doing right now, what they're struggling with right now. And I love that. You can tell, I just love
Wonderful,
that.
Yes,
It's like having a focus group to learn what's really going on in organizations, and at the same time get paid for it. How good is that? So we started with 4 different meetings in a year, and now we're doing 7, 8 of those meetings in a year. No more than 40 people,
40
ever.
People?
No more, because I know my skill.
It's just that person from each company, right? There's not.
I allow 2 people from
people
any one company, so 1 or 2, no more than 2, because I don't want them to be dominant. All of these are very big name brand companies. So when I look at the 80 companies that participate in my colloquium, and that's what I call it, a colloquium, and it kind of means peer-to-peer discussion. Okay. So peer-to-peer discussion. Those 80 companies hire 3 million people a year.
Wow.
So the leaders of them, and they may be at the top, but they probably are in between, but all of them are passionate. If they're not passionate, they can't come. They have to be compelled to want to get better. So when you get 40 people who are all interested in getting better, they have lots of questions to ask each other. So
that's the purpose of the group?
That's the purpose of the group.
Recruiting processes to be better?
Yes, absolutely, is to leverage their interest in improving and continuing to develop new ways that we can do this. Now, I will tell you that obviously from a process point of view, when people are starting to meet each other, it helps if you have methods to help break that down. So I write scenarios, strange things, like what would happen if you couldn't travel at all? How would you get people hired? How would you engage those folks?
So you bring the scenario to the session?
I bring the scenario to the session, I break them into teams, and I force them to compete to come up with better solutions.
Wow.
And in doing that, they then share what they're doing. So by the time we get to the second day, because it's a day and a half.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Day and a half. It's too intense. Most people are used to going to a conference now. They sit there and they're doing 5 things. They've got their, their computer on, they have their smartphone on,
Right.
and they're talking to people around them, and they're listening to whatever. In my sessions, you have to have full attention.
Right.
You have to be present. And that's very draining. So at the end of the day, on the end of the first day, we have a wonderful meal in the best restaurant in whatever town we're in. And we do it in different places, and it's hosted by different members of the colloquium. So we've been to Yahoo and Microsoft and Pepsi and all of these companies. They compete to be the host. And it's a lot of fun. That way you get to see what's going on inside that company, a little bit of a tour. So I enjoy it. We have as many companies as I can handle, so I'm a happy camper.
Doing it. You're the facilitator. You have another.
I have one other person
working with you.
So there's just 2 of us. We don't want to get bigger. We're happy to do what we're doing. We know that things are changing, so over the years we've gotten more in depth on issues around branding, around sourcing, around metrics. Increasingly in the U.S., our ability to integrate on a global basis is in question. And the staffing leaders who have not had significant international experience are now being tasked to get it or buy it, or they'll find somebody who can.
Contribute to
So we're going to, our first international one will be in London in October. And so here's what I have to do, though. I have to tell the staffing leaders that you can't come unless you have something and you know what's going on. So what they'll have to do is pair up with whoever is their counterpart in Europe. Because otherwise they're going to come to the meeting and go, well, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's different here. Or this is what I heard.
Yeah.
I want people to tell me what they know, right? So
you keep challenging them to do
it's a
more
challenge.
and more?
It's a challenge. I have 2 areas of primary interest to me that I get most passionate about. One is one has to do with the source of hire and really understanding how we examine and measure how people get to us.
Okay.
And I don't think it's a simple, trivial task.
It's getting more complicated.
I think it gets more and more complicated. I think there are more factors involved, and we're not using good statistics to examine those factors. We keep looking for the one thing. The silver bullet is what we usually refer to. And so I'm always interested in how we can do a little bit better job on that. So I collect data each year about how people were hired. So I just published a report on that, and that represents about 130,000 hires, and examines what I can learn. And some of it is we just collect bad data and report out on it, right? So that's one area. The other area is the candidate experience, because I believe that we have forgotten in our recruitment process
our candidates,
the stakeholder who may be the most important thing to us, which is the candidate, and the impact that how we treat them, and how that affects their engagement when they come to work.
Yeah.
And I believe that if we were to improve our ability to treat the candidate more effectively so that they could make better decisions, we would end up with better employees who are able to perform more faster.
Okay.
And so I do some unusual things with that.
What do you do with a candidate?
I study, I can't go out and see all the candidates, although I do go to employment offices.
Really?
I do go to colleges, and I sit around
and talk
to people.
To them? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, every month I go to at least one place so that I can just sit and listen to see if it's like what I heard. I do that all over the world, too. So
get to the field.
I've been to China, Russia, Japan, and this past year, India. I really want to go to Brazil.
Come to Israel.
And I really want to go to Israel because I've heard that some of the models that you have are uniquely different in the hiring process, and I really would like to better understand that. So I view myself as a student, and I find that a fascinating study. The other thing that I do here in the United States, I look at the biggest companies, the 500 biggest companies every year, and I look online at all of the pages that they create online for recruiting, and I examine them for the candidate experience. And then I apply to the list of the 100 best companies in America to work for.
Wow.
Under an assumed name.
So
I create, it's an unusual thing. I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Yeah, I think I read one of the reports.
And you had The Sopranos.
Yes.
That TV show?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Well, the first time I did this, The Sopranos were very big. So I called myself something like Bada Boom, something like that. And I worked for Bada Bing Corporation, that kind of thing. And I was a collections expert. So I wrote this resume up. We have a lot of fun writing the resumes. Now, I will tell you, I do this very seriously. So I do the resume, and then I give it to my friends, and I have them put them in their ATS.
Wow.
And then I change all of the keywords until it floats to the top, because I can lie really, really well. So I have been, a entry-level marketing person, an entry-level admin. I have been a recruiter. I have been a variety of things, and always from the best schools, with the best grades, with the best previous experience, with the big awards, and so I'm always.
And you tested the experience of applying.
So once I apply, I then test the experience of what I'm going to get back. What is the response rate?
You also test the application process itself?
Yes, the whole application process. So we write that up, and we talk about who is good and who isn't, which sometimes gets us in trouble.
Yeah.
But in the United States, we're very confrontive and very willing to say you're good and you're not. So.
Do you ever test one of your customers?
Oh yes, they're the first ones that we will call up and say, "This is broken," and mostly they thank us.
Yeah, they should.
Mostly they thank us. I think people are honest. They know that if it's not, doesn't work, it doesn't work. And some of them aspire to get better. That's what I want them to do.
Yeah.
No one's perfect. So I have, as you can see, I have a lot of fun doing that. It creates a little bit of a buzz. So people are kind of into that, and they always want to know who is the next character. And I've been Ted E. Bear. I've been Goldilocks. I've been a number of characters. Yes, the Bart Simpsons of the world. So we try to get the interesting little spelling. James Knee Cricket was my favorite because if you say that fast, it's Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah.
And it was one of my favorites because he worked for Geppetto in in a woodworking shop as an intern and so on. And here's the interesting thing: no recruiter ever read any of the resumes and figured it out.
Wow!
Until they took an interest in getting to me.
Yeah.
The reason is when a recruiter is trained to look at the copy and scan it, they only see the phrases that they want to see. And if they're in the proper places, boom, this is somebody I want to move on. And so I just find it kind of interesting in terms of tracking that. We have a good deal of fun with that.
So
and the data I publish.
Why did you choose these areas, the candidate experience and the sourcing and the leaders? I mean, it's
comes out of
unique, niche niches.
It is, and a lot of people still push back on why that might be valuable, and I keep saying I think we can measure that in fact it is. Part of it is my background in education. I became very fascinated with the psychology of how recruiting takes place and how people make decisions, and whether we're selling people to take a job they shouldn't be taking, which is sort of a sales kind of recruiter, or whether we're more of a coach, in helping them make the decision, the right decision. But are we willing to do that in the face of the fact that you've got this opening and this opening and this opening and this opening? We're often caught in that bind of how hard do we push them to consider something that they may not be ready for, when we think they are. So there's a set of issues here that I've always been fascinated by, and when I was in graduate school, I studied the recruiting process. One of my first jobs at Johnson & Johnson was in the hiring process, and I fell in love with it. And at that time, and this is many years ago before the internet, I brought in part-time people who were mentally challenged, but who could open envelopes with resumes and stack the resumes based upon the job, and did a good job doing that.
Reading each.
And they would do that all. They wouldn't read it. But they would read it enough and could read enough to put them in the right piles, so that the recruiters could come and have a pile and not spend the first hour of the day opening envelopes. That's not good use of recruiter time. And then at the end of the day, the recruiters bring them back the resumes that are not going to be used anymore. And before they were filed, the folks who I had in would copy over or put a postcard out or letter out.
Thank you for your...
Which thanked people, or told them what their status was, or told them of their interest. So 30 years ago, 100% of the 30,000 people who sent me resumes
got a response.
100%.
Personal response.
Personal, right. We had it orchestrated. And I was very proud of that. I felt that was an important part of who we were as recruiters in a world-class company.
And probably innovative at the time.
I don't know if I never thought about. I didn't think about it at the time as whether it was innovative or not. I just thought that's the right thing to do.
I'm sure it wasn't
Today,
a common practice at the time.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it was more of a common practice of larger corporations, and it might have taken weeks, if not months, to get back to all people, and they would use postcards and make it easy on them. Today, we've lost this art, if you will, but I think there's a science behind it. I think there's a rationale behind it. I think every stakeholder in the recruiting process has needs, and that we have a responsibility as stewards of this process to supply those needs so that the best decision can be made on both sides. And I'm fascinated by the companies that are making efforts to move in that direction, particularly with the technologies we now have.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You're tapping into the process in different, say, from the strategic point, working with the leaders, and then the sourcing venues or the different sourcing.
I'm a disruptive influence. There's a lot of planning here if you think about it in hindsight, but I just kind of move forward with it. The people who are very good in my colloquium, who I think are doing things now that they learned, they've aspired, they're using what they can from other people. Then I call the conferences, because I know all the people at all the conferences since I speak at all of them, and have been for 15, 16 years. I call them up and say, this person is ready to speak. They have a great case study. Because who's the best person to learn from? It's not me. All I can do is say, this is what this person is doing. Why don't I help this person get in front of you?
In front of the group.
So many of the people who speak at this conference and speak at other conferences in this country are part of my colloquium.
Wow. So how do you know who do you want to approach or do they turn to you and ask? Because I read in your
It
LinkedIn
comes
that
from
you said
different
that you
people.
turn to them.
Today, I would say in the last 2 days, 2 or 3 members of my colloquium came up and said, "This is a person you need to know."
Okay.
And they know what I'm looking for isn't the president of the firm or the head of HR. It's really a recruiter who is passionate, who cares about what they're doing, who just wants to get better. So they know what I'm looking for.
So that's what you're looking for when you talk to them.
Oh yeah,
the passion to
I'm
learn?
looking for people who love this function. If they just like it, it's a nice place to be. It's a stepping stone for my next job. Good. God bless.
Good luck.
God bless.
Yeah.
Have a good time. Have a good conference. But people who go, "This is mine. This is what I do." Mm-hmm. What does it take to be the best there is? Those are the people that they're going to get there. I have no illusions. They'll get there without me, for sure. But if I can find them and spot them early and give them a little bit of a help, then I'm helping change things too. I'm helping to move the industry a little bit faster.
So that's your purpose to
at
look
this
at the
point,
industry and try
when you're
and move
63 years old, purpose is a very different thing when you're 23.
I'm sure you have a purpose for doing all of this.
I love doing it. It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good, and I can do it.
To move the industry.
To help move the industry from where it should be. The people who are doing it. They have to discover, they have to measure, they have to experiment with the tools that we have.
Yeah.
They have to invent and think about the new set of tools. So when I look at a Chris Hoyt at Pepsi,
it's wonderful.
Who's wonderful and part of my colloquium, and he has his new app for Pepsi. He, 3 or 4 weeks ago in Dallas when he was launching, just before he launched it, he was at a meeting, and so he's sitting there showing everybody how it works, and they're giving him feedback, critique, and suggestions for what he might do next with that. So that's powerful. It's my way of thinking, and it affirms him that he's moving in the right direction.
Right. Do you have time for another question?
Sure.
So I was wondering, from your international experience, when you visited the different places, do you think there's things that recruiters that sit in different international locations should be aware of that you saw that are different or that can help them?
I think there's an assumption in some countries that America or the U.S. is ahead, and I don't believe that that's necessarily true. So if for example, when I used to go to Australia, and on every street corner, the 5 newspapers in that country, I could get the newspaper for all of Australia right there, in every street corner. Well, that's pretty easy. So maybe print isn't dead, because I have access to a universe. In this country, we have 900 daily papers, and you can't get the paper for Omaha. So if you want to work in Omaha, you don't have that capability. So papers died faster. So it's access to information, and not just an assumption about what the tool might be or should be. I think that in some countries, mobile has moved much faster than in the United States, and that the type of the population that I might want to go after is already using it in other parts of the world, whereas here in the U.S. there's not sufficient numbers yet using mobile in the ways that it might be used elsewhere.
So you see mobile as
mobile is going to be a monstrous issue, and maybe stronger in I would look to other parts of the world perhaps for ideas about how mobile might be used better or differently than it currently is. I think the language itself has an issue, so that if I'm Japanese and I'm using mobile, I can share a great deal more information in characters that have huge meaning, right? And I'm not, believe me, I'm not really good with languages, but I get that when I see, this small little piece of Chinese characters, and they're telling me they're reading the entire memo or whatever, and I'm going, oh, I get it. You can scan this stuff a lot faster than I can, you know. So, you know, when I go to China and I realize that people are often are single child since 1978 or something like that, so most people have grown up without ever knowing a large family. Their whole idea about teamwork and other things is very different.
You're right.
So if I'm trying to move my organizational culture to a different area, I really have to take into account some interesting things, some skills and competencies that I might take as for granted in the United States, maybe more learned somewhere else. We have issues around values. We all value different kinds of things. In some cultures, there is a separation by race, by gender, by whatever. And so now the issue is, if I'm a company and I value diversity, what does that really mean when I try to translate that to Israel, to South Africa, to wherever? And fundamentally, there has to be respect, but at the same time, there also has to be a clear basis for how we work. You know, what is going to make this company more competitive than other companies? That's what our intention is in the U.S. We want to make our companies competitive and the people successful. And if it means more the diversity adds to that competitiveness, then we need to examine how we ensure that happens.
Remain diverse.
Right. Different cultures value women in different ways. And so fundamentally, when I look at Japan, when I look at some other cultures, there's some interesting issues that we have to deal with as we become more integrated on a global basis. Because if we're going to be separate, that's different. Then I'm not paying any attention to what they're doing over there. But that's not what's happening with multinational companies. They're saying we want an integration on a global scale, respecting various cultures, but making sure our core values are hired. And that translates quickly to hiring, right? Right. So I'm fascinated by the nuances that I see in various places that I've been, in India, in Russia and Japan and what have you. And I came late to international kind of work, so I still see that as a child sees it, you know, oh my God, that's what, you know, you do what over there, you know, it's just fascinating.
It's very interesting to see what you will think about Israel. We're going to get you there.
That's what I look forward to.
Excellent. So I've got one last quick question. I've been working a lot with recruiters in Israel to have them learn how to do recruiting in social networks.
Yes.
And there's a big group that's very interested in it, and there's a big group that says, I'm not so sure that it's the right way to go. Right. What would you tell recruiters?
I would say first, what is it that your best candidates are doing with social networks, if anything? If you're looking for engineers and there are no engineers using social networks.
No, they are.
I got it. So then, but the question might be, what are they doing? I have an engineering degree, and I got a lot of engineering friends who don't want to have any footprint.
I agree. And you,
so
like I say, you see
there
both
may be, you know,
types.
based upon privacy, security, a variety of other things. But it's not your employer's issue. It's the candidate's issue. So it's really
start by
understanding.
Checking the candidates.
Check, survey, do focus groups, learn what the candidates are doing and how fast they're moving from here to here, if at all. Are they moving in that direction or moving in that direction?
And if they're in the networks, not for business but for
social
purposes, would you still?
I'd be asking them. Some are okay with that. Some want to know certain things about companies. The other piece of this is it's a two-way street. So most of us think about social network in terms of the message we want to get out,
or the conversation that we want to create with.
Well, but how willing are you to simply lay it out that if you want to have a conversation with me, I'm here to have that conversation any way you choose.
I have another position or another position.
Right. So one way of looking at social networking isn't using it to get to them.
Right.
It's just being there if they want to engage you. So where would they find you? Where would they look? They would go to Google, maybe, and they would say, I want a job like what? When they get a results page, are you there?
Okay.
If you're not, then you may be missing an opportunity because you're looking at how they find you. If you if they look for if they say to Facebook, and I don't know why they would do it, but if they do and they say to Facebook, I think I'd like a job in supply chain, you should show up. If that's what you have as those things. And maybe they're not at that point looking to apply for the job. They want to find out about the job. So maybe on a social network like a Facebook, it's not to apply here. It's to here are the people who specialize in hiring supply chain experts in our company, and here's a profile of who they are.
Do you have any question that you'd like to
And if you have questions, you could say, and let's say you don't want to have a lot of people beating you down all of the time, so you say every Wednesday we have a little webinar or a little chat room, and we're going to engage folks and see where they want to go. And it's not hard to get from that step to, do you want to stay in touch with us?
Right.
And here are a couple ways we can do that in a way that doesn't cost me a lot of time, energy, and effort, and doesn't cause you a lot of time, energy, and effort.
So you're saying that the switch in there, the perspective is instead of looking for places to broadcast and saying, is the network the right place for me to broadcast?
Broadcast is 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That's what we thought. But being where somebody else wants you at the right time, right place.
And just being there.
Just being there. And being willing to answer questions no one else will ask.
Yeah.
If I'm in this country, there aren't many women engineers. In fact, only 17% of the practicing engineers in the United States are women.
Wow.
So if I were a really high-performing woman engineer, and I might be interested in a company that valued me, because mine isn't valuing me as much, what are you willing to tell me about how many women have been hired in the last year versus how many engineers? How many have moved from one position to another? How many have been promoted in the last 2 to 3 years? Do you know that answer?
Salary differences.
What are the salary differences, at these bands and these levels? If I'm a recruiter who's world class, I know the answers to those. And you know something? I have no fear in telling you that we're not as good as we should be here, and I'm committed to helping make that difference. Are you good enough to come join us and help push that difference?
Yeah.
So can I? And if you're not, this is the wrong place for you. Don't make that decision. That's a whole different.
So
there's a transparency there that most American companies still have not gotten. When they get that, or when the companies that do get that, now they're getting how to use social media in a whole different way.
So recruiters should basically know the tools so that they'll be able to choose where they want to, where's the right place for them to be, not ignore it up front.
And I think recruiters should also ask themselves, how good do I want to be? Really, how good do I want to be, and how am I going to measure that? Do I measure it in terms of my income, or do I measure it in terms of the people's lives that I change? And I raise that only because I can't answer it for anyone. I can only answer it for me. It's a very personal issue about how you measure your success.
Right.
But I think it's true no matter what you do. But fundamentally, I'm not worried about other things. I'm only worried about recruiting. And I think recruiting has an opportunity, because of what it does, to change people's lives. And if we're not doing it well, it screws up organizations, but more importantly, it screws up the people in those organizations. So I believe we've got a great function. I admire the recruiters who are out there every day slugging it out, trying to make that placement, put that butt in that seat, and all of those things. But I want them also to be better than that. I want them to think much, much broader about what this means if you do this for a lifetime. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Thanks a lot.